I saw her again at the cafe on the corner. She wasn't supposed to be there, at least not according to the loose schedule I'd built in my head. Usually, mornings were mine. My table by the window, black coffee cooling too fast, a notebook I never actually wrote in. She was more of an afternoon regular. Different rhythm, different life. But that morning, she walked in like she'd misplaced the day. I noticed her before she saw me. Dark coat shrugged halfway off her shoulders. Hair pulled back but a few strands loose, like she'd been in a rush. She ordered tea, of course. Always tea. I don't know why that mattered, but it did. When she turned and caught me watching, I almost looked away. Almost. Instead, I lifted my cup like I'd been about to drink anyway, pretending the moment was hers, not mine. She smiled. Just once, quick. And then she came over. "Morning," she said, setting her mug down on the table across from mine, like the seat had always been waiting. I nodded. "You're early. You keep track." I almost choked on the coffee. "No, just noticed." That made her laugh, soft but with a hint of surprise, like she wasn't used to being noticed at all. The truth was I noticed too much. The way her thumb always traced the rim of her cup before the first sip. The way she'd glance at the door twice, never once, as though she was daring someone else to walk in. And now, how she sat across from me without asking, her eyes studying me like she was trying to remember something. We talked about nothing. The weather that couldn't decide between late winter and early spring. How the cafe had changed their cups to something smaller. My job, though I left most of it vague. She didn't press. At one point, she leaned forward, squinting slightly. "Your hair," she said. I froze. "What about it?" She tilted her head, lifted a hand before I could react, and brushed a strand out of my face. Fingers light, just there for a second too long. "Better?" she murmured, and then pulled back like nothing had happened. I laughed, though it came out uneven. "Guess I should hire you as a stylist." Her smile was brief, almost embarrassed. "Trust me, I'm retired from that role." But the touch lingered. Even when she went back to sipping her tea, even when she shifted the conversation to safer ground, even when her phone buzzed and she ignored it, I could still feel the ghost of her hand near my temple. The rest blurred. She left before me, wrapping her coat tighter, apologizing that she should get back. I nodded, said I'd see her around, but the words felt thin. I sat there long after she was gone, staring at the space where her mug had been. The notebook stayed blank. My coffee went cold. By the time I finally stood to leave, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting nothing, but there it was, a text from her. "If you're not busy later, I made too much soup." I read it twice, 3 times. My thumb hovered, the screen glowing in my hand. I didn't answer right away, but I didn't put the phone away either. I went. Not right away, though. I told myself I'd just drop by for a minute, thank her for the offer, maybe take the soup in a container and leave. Keep it light, neighborly, safe. But when she opened the door, something in her expression, half surprised, half relieved, made leaving impossible. "Come in," she said, stepping back. She wore a loose sweater, sleeves pushed up, hair tied the same careless way as that morning. The apartment smelled faintly of garlic and rosemary, like warmth itself. I slipped off my shoes, awkward. "Thanks for the invite." "It's just soup," she said, leading me toward the kitchen. Don't make it sound like more than it is. But it felt like more. 2 bowls were already set on the counter, steam rising. She'd been expecting me, even if she hadn't known for sure. We sat at her small table, knees almost touching. She pushed a slice of bread across to me. "Eat," she said. "You look like you forget to." I smiled, though it stung a little, because she was right. For a while, we ate in silence, the kind that felt too heavy to be casual. I kept glancing at her hands. She had a silver ring she turned absent-mindedly, round and round. A habit, maybe, or something to do when she was holding back words. Eventually, she spoke. "When I was your age, I thought everything was temporary. Jobs, apartments, even people. like I'd just keep trading one thing for another until I landed somewhere permanent. Her voice softened. Turns out, permanent doesn't really exist. I didn't know what to say. She didn't look at me, just at her soup, blowing on it slowly. You mean, my divorce? She said simply, as if she were reciting a fact. Not bitter, not dramatic. Just, there. I nodded, my throat tight. I wanted to ask more, but the words jammed up. Instead, I tore my bread into smaller and smaller pieces, pretending I was thinking about the soup. She caught me watching her after a while. Don't overthink it, she said gently. I'm not. I lied. But I was. About her. About me. About how the air between us kept shifting, like a line was being drawn and erased at the same time. When we finished, I offered to help with the dishes. She hesitated, then handed me a towel. We stood shoulder to shoulder at the sink, rinsing, drying, stacking plates. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full, too full, pressing in around us. At one point, our hands touched when she passed me a glass. Not long, not even intentional. Just skin brushing skin. But it went through me like a fault line. She noticed too. I could tell by the way she paused, then set the next plate down more carefully than necessary. I almost made a joke. Something easy, something to deflect. But when I looked at her, she was already looking at me. Not smiling. Not speaking. Just looking. And I thought, I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After that night, I kept waiting for things to reset. For her to retreat behind polite nods in the hallway. For me to pretend I hadn't been standing in her kitchen like it meant something. But it didn't reset. The next week, I ran into her on the stairs. She was balancing a grocery bag against her hip, one strap slipping. Without thinking, I caught it. Our hands overlapped on the canvas, her knuckles brushing mine. Careful, I said. She exhaled, quick. Thanks. That should have been it. A small favor. But then she invited me in again. Just for a minute, I'll make tea. And of course I followed. We sat in her living room this time. The lamplight was softer than the cafe's harsh brightness. The walls felt close, books stacked unevenly. A blanket tossed over the couch. Felt lived in a way my place never did. She handed me a mug. Our fingers touched again. Neither of us moved too fast to pull away. You're quiet tonight, she said. Am I? You usually, I don't know. Fill the silence more. I laughed softly. Maybe I like the silence. She tilted her head, studying me. Too long. Too carefully. And then a knock on her door. Sharp. Sudden. She startled. Set her mug down too quickly. 1 second. I stayed frozen on the couch while she opened it. A friend, older than me, maybe her age. They spoke in low voices. I heard my name once, her tone low, cautious. Then the friend's eyes flicked past her and landed on me. A beat of silence. A faint smile. Polite but unreadable. Didn't know you had company, the friend said. Just a neighbor, she replied quickly. Too quickly. The door closed after a minute. She lingered by it, her back to me, shoulders tense. I wanted to say something, anything to break the strange air, but the words felt useless. Finally she turned, forced a half-smile. Sorry. She drops by sometimes. It's fine. But it wasn't, because in that small exchange I felt it, the pullback. The line she wanted to redraw. She sat again, not as close this time. Her hand stayed folded in her lap, not moving toward mine. The conversation limped along after that. Weather, work, little scraps. Both of us pretending the friend hadn't seen something, hadn't wondered. At one point, she laughed at something I said, quiet and reluctant, then caught herself and shook her head. This probably isn't a good idea. I swallowed. My chest tightened, but I nodded like I agreed. Yeah, probably. But then silence again. And in that silence, her eyes lifted to mine, holding. Neither of us looked away. Her hand twitched, just slightly, like she almost reached across the couch. I leaned forward before I realized I was moving. Not a kiss. Not even a touch. Just the kind of closeness where every breath feels loud, every second fragile. And then she stood up, abrupt like cutting a wire. "More tea?" she asked, voice too steady. I leaned back, hands tight in my lap. "Sure," I said, but the moment stayed, humming between us, unfinished. It was late when I saw her again, walking back from the store with a paper bag tucked under her arm. The street was almost empty, just the hum of a streetlight and the faint bark of a dog down the block. I caught up without thinking. "Need help?" She looked over, startled, then smiled a little. "You again." "I'm fine." But she let me take the bag anyway. We walked in silence, side by side. Her coat sleeve brushed mine every few steps, and it felt louder than our footsteps. When we reached the small park across from our building, she stopped. "Mind sitting for a minute?" We sat on the cold bench. The bag rested between us like a chaperone. She rubbed her hands together, breath visible in the air. "You ever think about how quiet it gets after 9? She asked. I nodded. "Sometimes too quiet." She laughed, soft. "That's when the thoughts sneak in." I didn't ask what kind. I already guessed. For a while we just sat there. The lamplight caught in her hair, strands moving when the breeze picked up. She looked tired, but not in the way that meant sleep. Tired in the way of holding things back too long. Then she said it almost to herself. "This isn't fair to you." My chest tightened. "What isn't?" Her eyes stayed forward. "All of this, talking, letting myself." She trailed off, shook her head. "You're too young to be carrying my mess around." I wanted to argue, tell her it didn't feel like a burden, that it felt like the only time I wasn't pretending. But I couldn't find the words fast enough. She glanced at me, quick, as if checking if I'd break. "You probably have girls your age who don't complicate things." I almost laughed, but it came out raw. "I don't want girls my age." That silenced her. She looked at me then, really looked, and I thought I'd gone too far, like I'd said something I couldn't pull back. Her hand gripped the edge of the bench. Mine twitched beside it, wanting to close the gap but not daring. "You don't know what you're saying," she whispered. "Maybe not, but I know how it feels." The words hung there, too big, too bare. She shook her head, but it wasn't rejection. It was something closer to fear. "You make it sound easy." It isn't. We sat like that, inches apart, both of us caught in the weight of everything unsaid. I could hear the soft rhythm of her breathing, see her lips part slightly, as if she wanted to add something and couldn't. I leaned forward just slightly. The world felt suspended, the air sharp, expectant. She turned toward me, our faces close enough that I could see the faintest line at the corner of her mouth, the tremor in her exhale. And then she asked, barely audible, "What are we doing?" The next morning, she wasn't at the cafe. I told myself it didn't matter, that people had lives, appointments, errands. But then the next morning came, and the one after that, and her chair by the wall stayed empty. By the fourth day, I walked slower past her door, listening for sound. Nothing. Not music, not movement. Just silence pressing against the hallway. I tried to shrug it off. I filled the time with work, with scrolling too late at night, with making coffee I didn't drink. But the pause between each day and the next felt heavier without her in it. Then, one evening, I saw her in the parking lot. She was carrying 2 grocery bags, her shoulders tighter than usual, her steps faster. She almost didn't look at me. "Hey," I said. She stopped, forced a smile. "Hi." Her voice was polite, careful, like I was no different than the mailman or the neighbor 3 doors down. "Been a while," I tried. "Busy week," she answered, shifting the bags in her hands. She didn't ask how I'd been, didn't offer tea, just a nod. Then, "Take care." And then she was inside, door closing too quickly behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at the chipped paint of her doorframe, wondering what I'd done, or if it wasn't me at all. 2 days later, I found out. Not from her. From accident. From timing. I was locking my door when a teenage girl came up the stairs, earbuds in, dragging a small suitcase. She stopped at her mother's door, the door I'd been staring at all week. and knocked twice before it opened. Her voice carried through the hallway. "Hi, Mom." Her daughter. I hadn't known. The realization rearranged everything. The silences, the hesitations, the moments she pulled back just when I leaned closer. I tried not to think about it, but I did. Constantly. That night, my phone lit up with her name. I opened the message before I could stop myself. "Sorry if I've seemed distant. Things are complicated right now." I typed out half a reply. "I understand. I'm here if you need." Then I erased it. Typed again. Deleted again. In the end, I left the screen blank. Not sent. Not saved. Just vanished, like it had never been written at all. I set the phone face down on the table, stared at the darkened window. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. It happened on a Tuesday. Not planned, not dramatic. Just me carrying a bag of trash down the stairs and her coming up at the same time. We stopped, halfway. Her hand tightened on the railing, mine on the trash bag, like we both needed something solid to keep from blurting out what we'd been swallowing for weeks. "Hi," she said first, breathless, though she hadn't been rushing. "Hey." Silence stretched. I almost stepped aside, let her pass, but something in the way she lingered made me hold still. Finally, she sighed. "You weren't supposed to get pulled into this." "Into what?" She looked at me, really looked. Her eyes tired, softer than I'd ever seen. "My life. My mess. You're too young to." She cut herself off, shook her head. "You should be somewhere else, with someone else." Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled on the railing. I set the trash bag down. The smell didn't matter. Nothing did. "I don't care about should," I said. My throat felt tight. "I care that I think about you every damn day." The words came out flat, almost harsh, because I didn't know how else to say them without breaking. She flinched, like I'd hit some nerve she'd worked hard to keep hidden. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because it makes it harder to pretend." The stairwell went quiet. The hum of the building's boiler downstairs, the faint echo of footsteps above us. Everything felt distant. Just her and me, standing there like the world was waiting for someone to decide. I took a small step closer. Not enough to touch. Just enough. "I don't want to pretend anymore." Her eyes closed. For a second, I thought she'd walk past me. Or worse, turn and go back down. But when she opened them, she looked smaller, like some weight had finally slipped. "You scare me," she whispered. "I scare you." She nodded. "Because when you're here, I forget all the reasons I told myself no." That broke something in me, not in a painful way, but in the way a door breaks open after being locked too long. I reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull back. She didn't. My hand brushed hers on the railing, light, uncertain. But there. She let out a shaky breath. And then, for the first time, she didn't move away. We stood like that, touching only at the hands, saying nothing. It was enough. Her lips curved, the faintest smile. Fragile, real. "Okay," she said softly. Just that. No promises. No future drawn out. Just okay. And I nodded because it was all I'd wanted. It was 8:47 a.m. when I saw her again at the small bench in the park across from our building. Not by accident. She'd left a note slipped under my door. "Meet me if you want coffee." I held the thermos she'd left on the counter the night before. Still warm, black coffee. She was already there, scarf wrapped loosely around her neck, hands cupped around a mug. The steam curled like it had its own quiet rhythm. We sat side by side. Not touching, but not distant either. The bench felt like an anchor, like it had been waiting for us. I glanced at her, noticing the familiar tilt of her head as she watched a pigeon hop across the grass. A smile tugged at her lips, small, unforced. "Morning," I said. "Morning," she replied, voice steady. Comfortable, like home. We talked about nothing important. The weather. The way a tree outside her window had lost another branch. The neighbor downstairs who still left his shoes in the hallway. And then, without really deciding, she handed me a piece of toast wrapped in a napkin. "For later," she said. I laughed quietly. You've thought of everything. She shrugged, her eyes flicking toward mine. Some things are worth thinking about. I sipped the coffee, bitter and grounding, and let the warmth settle through me. We didn't talk about the weeks of distance, the near confessions, the silences that had stretched too long. We didn't need to. Those moments had already settled into the spaces between us. Later, we walked down the street slowly, the thermos between us, like carrying a small piece of routine that belonged only to us. I caught her glancing at me, and for the first time I didn't flinch. We passed the park bench from that night, the one where she'd almost admitted fear, where I'd almost leaned too far. We didn't stop. Just a glance, a shared memory held quietly, like a secret only we understood. At the building, she paused by her door. See you later? See you later, I echoed, knowing it wasn't just words. Inside, I leaned my head against my apartment door, letting the hum of life filter in. Black coffee, small talk, a shared thermos, a bench in the park. It all felt ordinary, but somehow entirely ours. I thought of her hand brushing my hair that first morning, the near confession on the stairs, the pause that had stretched for days. And I realized, love wasn't the fireworks or the dramatic declarations. It was this, quiet, earned, imperfect, a final sip of coffee, a soft exhale. And I smiled because she'd already walked inside, the scent of rosemary and life lingering like a quiet promise. Only we would understand that. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?